Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you have questions about the watches you see, reach out to me directly. For purchase, pricing, boxes, papers, or accessories information, tmosso at thewatchbox.com is my email address. And we love to build inventory, which means we take trades. We also purchase watches. No upper limit on value paid. We will buy an entire collection. We pay cash, we pay fast, we make the process easy and instant. To buy, trade, or sell a watch, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, let's start with a watch that's one of the most appealing and most accessible in today's episode. This was a 2021 140-piece limited edition for the Thongxia Group, the Southeast Asian distributor of Grand Seiko. So this was a regional distributor, special edition, and limited series in stainless steel with the 44GS case shape. This is from the Heritage Collection. It's the SBGH287, and in addition to those lovely Zaratsu finished polished facets, we have a dial that's granular, chiseled, and light blue metallic. And while it is nature-inspired, it also looks very similar to the well-received Kirazuri dials on the U.S. market limited editions from about 4 years ago, so that's worth remembering. The timepiece is very wearable. It's part of the Heritage Collection, so you have that circa 1967 44GS case shape, which includes facets, creases and curves, polish and satin. The dial featuring dial furniture entirely hand-finished and hand-placed, including faceted and black-polished Dauphine hands for the hours and minutes. We have faceted and polished hour indices framed for the date and Grand Seiko logo. It is a Hi-Beat, so while it may appear to be spring drive, the smooth sweep is due to the 36,000 vibration per hour beat rate, or 10 beats per second, that's 5 hertz. Rotating around to see this watch on the wrist, you can see that although it's a 40, it wears fairly short across the wrist, so think of it as more of a 38 in terms of how it actually fits. It's easy to wear on my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, no challenges in that regard. Easy to wear under a cuff as well, although it's not the thinnest watch, it is fairly flat. You'll have no trouble in that regard. The watch has a small round scale alligator leather strap, which is an unusual cut of alligator to use, but it gives it a different kind of appearance, especially when combined with an aviator-like contrasting stitch. On the bottom, calfskin, brand new strap. You see the buckle. It is a single folding clasp with twin trigger release. And then we have on the reverse side the caliber 9S85 automatic winding with a 5 hertz beat rate and a 55-hour power reserve. It's adjusted to 6 positions and accurate to no worse than -3 + 5 seconds per day. Now, let's take a look at a watch that can give it a run for its money. When we talk about accessible watches in this episode, yeah, there's crazy stuff, but there's a reason I saved these two for the opener. I love that Grand Seiko, and I love this Rolex Air King. So we have one of the last of the 34mm Rolex Air Kings. This one's a V series serial number. It has a radially arrayed set of orange Arabic numerals. We have a metallic sunburst underneath the hour track, and then a deeply grooved metallic blue concentric pattern at center. It uses the circa 1957 Air King logo, and while it still has just as much text as a standard Rolex watch, you don't have the block text on the dial. You can see how it's arrayed in a round-robin fashion around the center that actually cleans up the dial quite a bit. 100 meters water-resistant, chronometer certified, made of 904L steel, with a 48-hour power reserve and a beautiful fit on the wrist. It looks like a vintage bubble back. This 34mm size is perfect for my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, and the watch is just over 41mm from lug to lug, so you can wear this on a small wrist, a man's wrist, a woman's wrist. Even a child can wear this well. It's one of my favorite modern Rolex designs and a rare one. You don't see this 114-200 very often. Rarer still, that spectacular blue and orange concentric dial. That's a very cool watch and one I absolutely adore. This is also the first time I've had this watch, and I've been doing this for 8 years, so rest assured these are quite rare. Now, if you want to go haute horlogerie, now we start talking about the expensive pieces, but I still feel like you get great value with the 3rd generation Vacheron overseas self-winding. 41mm in diameter, it includes a remarkable quick release system whereby you get the bracelet from the factory, but you also get a rubber strap, you also get a leather strap, and you get a separate clasp for those straps. So you wind up with 3 different bands and a quick release system that allows you to swap between them. Now there is a sliding sleeve mechanism on each side of the clasp, so you get 1.5mm of incremental adjustment on each side, and you can deploy both, you can deploy one, you can deploy neither, but it's nice to know you've got that flexibility. More still in the fact that every single link in the bracelet is removable, and we even have an intermediate sized link in there so you can easily find the right right size, even if you're between link sizes. The finishing on this bracelet is as fine as anything you'll receive from Audemars Piguet or Patek Philippe, and in some regards, especially the interior polishing of these links, the quality might even be a little bit better. Now, one thing that sets the Generation 3 Overseas apart from the prior model lines is the combination of a display case back and manufacture movement, and that's exactly what we have right here. We've got the automatic winding twin mainspring barrel, 60-hour power reserve, caliber 5100. It has a 22-karat rotor with a compass rose pattern with no fewer than 4 different finishes. The beveling's high grade, so are the stripes. You can see all screw heads are black polished with chamfered slots and circumference. We have Geneva hallmark on the bridges, but also on the case, as since 2012 it has been a full watch standard, not just movement finish. Also important, there's a soft iron ring that encompasses the movement. It actually rings it. So it's 150 meters, water resistant, and it's 25,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetic. Remember, 4,800 ampere per meter qualifies as an anti-magnetic watch, so this is quite a bit more. Dial side, we have a classic combination of a rose gold watch with a silver sunburst dial and plenty of luminescence to enjoy your watch in the dark. The watch wears nicely, though, like I mentioned earlier, there's a ton of flexibility and adjustability built in. Throw it on my wrist 16 centimeters. Once more, you can see it wears larger than its rated size, so think of it more as a 42 or a 43. Still, it is quite thin, and if you want it to fit even better on a smaller wrist, just throw it on one of the factory straps that comes with it. This is a wonderfully robust watch that feels incredible. The mass of all that gold is awe-inspiring. Speaking of gold, you don't see yellow gold that often anymore, rarer still on avant-garde watches. What we've got here is the UR100 yellow gold, a 2020 limited edition of 25 pieces from Erverk. So this is Erverk's UR100, a 25-piece limited edition with ultra pale 2N yellow gold, which makes it look like vintage 14 karat, 9 karat, or 7 karat. We have these dramatic engraved strakes on the top of the case as well as on the flanks. It's about 49.5 millimeters from end to end and 43 millimeters wide. You can see there's a carousel mechanism that features Erverk's signature digital display, and I'll show you how this works. It's very simple. The hour that is oncoming enters at right, so you're looking at 11 right there. Now we are looking at 11 o'clock. Now you can see that 11 and its index pointing to 15, that's 11:15. Right there, that is 11:30, and there's quite a bit of animation as the carousel rotates. Don't think you're shortchanged the fine finish too, as all of the visible elements have been excruciatingly finished in the finest fashion. You can also see that there's plenty of luminescence, and it glows brightly. 2 different lume colors, green and blue. This is a watch with a lot going on in the dark, so if you enjoy lume, this is your watch. You can see UR100 on the reverse side, a unique winding rotor system. It's based on a Zenith Elite. Erverk calls this the UR1201. It's an automatic winder based on the Zenith with a 48-hour power reserve, a 4 hertz beat rate. Although it doesn't have a seconds hand, it does feature stop seconds. And then we have this little display system on the flank. So over 20 minutes, what you're looking at is the travel of the Earth, the distance traversed over the course of 20 minutes relative to the sun. So the Earth, in its orbit around the sun, moves 35,742 kilometers in 20 minutes, and on its axis, the Earth rotates 555.55 kilometers. Flip it all over one more time, you have that wonderful turbine-like winding system, and the watch uses an Erverk proprietary strap to actually understate its size. The watch wears just fine on my wrist, and if you just looked at the bare measurements, you'd think that it's too large, but it's only 13.4 millimeters thick. The case flank is surprisingly well sloped, and you can see how the lugs help to arc down and around the wrist. I would recommend this watch for a wrist of at least 16 centimeters circumference, so if your wrist is my size or larger, you're going to find it wears quite nicely. That watch is a lot of fun from what I believe to be one of the most underrated independents, and that's ironic because Erverk was also one of the very first. Let's talk about accessible horology. Omega is luxury, and this is an Omega that bucks the trend of Speedmasters and Seamasters. This is a timepiece, the Ville Prestige, launched in 1998, only made for about 1 model year. It is a rare example of an Omega jump hour. It's stainless steel, and it features a lovely stamped salmon dial with wonderfully deep rayon grooves. You can see that Breguet style Arabic numerals used along with a comparable font on the jumping hour disc. It is an automatic winder. Inside it's an Omega 1120 with a module. They call this the caliber 1221, automatic winding with a 40-hour power reserve. It has the jump hour complication. It's quite thin in profile at under 9 millimeters thick. And then it's only about 43 millimeters from lug to lug, so anyone can wear this watch. It's a unisex option, wears well on smaller wrists. It's also quite thin, so you'll have no trouble wearing it underneath a dress cuff. These usually come to us naked, but this one's an exception in that it has full box and papers. A really special watch and one of my favorite Omega watches of all time. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Swatch Group, in the 2020 model year, I have to admit, we all had other things on our mind. It was the beginning of COVID, economic downturn, the cancellation of SIHH and Bosworld. It was easy to miss out on that year's novelties, but this one's worth remembering. 43 millimeters in Sedna red gold. This is the Blancpain 50 fathoms bathyscaphe. Using Omega's Sedna red gold, you have more copper to make it redder and then more palladium to ensure that it won't fade over time. It is visually and technically the equivalent of Rolex's Everrose. Now we have here a really high quality 120 click bezel. Line up the bezel pearl with the hybrid baton syringe style hands, and you can see that you've got a 0 to 60 minute count up timer. All three hands are loomed, so you know whether your watch is running in the dark and in the depths. The watch includes a metallic sunburst blue dial, a sailcloth strap with a rubber inlay on the bottom, and the glorious and still cutting edge caliber 1315, all this water resistant down to 300 meters. You can see the bevels here are a mile wide and some of the highest quality I've ever found on a series production watch. It's a 3-barrel automatic winder with 120 hours of power reserve. It's 6 position adjusted, not 5. It's free sprung for durability and precise adjustment. It has an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, 3 mainspring barrels, so it has a nice even release of torque. It doesn't tend to gallop when fully wound or slow down excessively after 24, 36, or 48 hours. You can see that there's a lovely spiral graining across the bridges, which is a wonderful alternative to something like Côte de Genève, which would seem out of place on such a modern movement. You can also see that we have black polished screw heads, a rotor that features media blasting, satination, and beveling. It is quite impressive, and again, the bezel is one of the most refined I've ever encountered, with a ceramic cap on its top. The watch is about 49 millimeters from lug to lug. It wears quite nicely. It's 13.5 millimeters thick. It wears nice on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist, and I'd say on a wrist of my size or larger, it's going to look nice too. A wonderful timepiece that's more compact than the 5015 and definitely a lot thinner. This reference 5000 bathyscaphe is the way to go if you're just slightly undersized for the 5015, but you don't want to sacrifice any capability. Now here's a watch that came out in 2018. Now in 2016, Zenith brought back the 1960s Italian military Cronometro Tipo CP2. This watch is the update of that 2016 revival in that it features a flyback complication. So this uses the caliber 405 El Primero, originally built for the legendary Rainbow flyback chronographs built for French military aviation in the 90s. Now, the watch is far more modern than the original Tipo CP2. We have a 100-meter water-resistant case, 43 millimeters in diameter, with a titanium case back. The rest is in burnished bronze, giving it an agreeable aged and lived-in look. Now, we have here a bidirectional bezel, but unlike most bidirectional bezels, this one has a super refined 120 click action. These typically aren't as sharp feeling as dive bezels, and they're usually 60 clicks. This one is 120, which allows for greater precision of location, but also a more satisfying tactile experience. You turn off the light, and you can see all three primary hands are loomed, which means chronograph seconds, hours, and minutes. Then you roll it over. You can see caliber 405 on the back. Zenith El Primero, automatic winding, 50-hour power reserve, 5 hertz beat rate or 10 beats per second. It also features a combination of a column wheel function selector and a lateral clutch system for engagement. You can see, though it's a pilot style watch, it is 100 meters water resistant. It's a large timepiece, though, I'm not going to lie to you. It spans the wrist to the point where I would say that your wrist needs to be my size or larger to wear this, because if your wrist is any smaller, you're going to get lug overlap, and nowhere is that more obvious than from directly over the top. But still, it's not excessively thick. It has a nice light feel due to the combination of bronze and sapphire and titanium, so it feels wieldy on the wrist. A wonderful all-arounder with a oily nubuck style leather. That doesn't literally mean it's oily, it just means it has a velvety, suede-like feeling. And then you can also appreciate the fact that this is a gradient dial from light at the center to dark at the edge with a lovely pebbly-like texturing, a grained bronze fade, truly impressive with rose gold hands, a lovely watch from Zenith's Pilot collection. Here's a watch that came out in 2010 and isn't generally well known even amongst fans of Cartier. This is the Rotonde de Cartier Heure Sautante. It is a jumping hour circular manufacture movement Cartier that was originally designed for the well-regarded CPCP collection that ran from 1998 to 2008. But the collection was canceled just before this one was ready for market, which means this was built for the CPCP, so it even has the old CPCP monograms on the bridges. So this is CPCP in all but name. It wound up coming out under the successor Cartier Fine Watchmaking. It's 42 millimeters in diameter in red gold. You can see it's only 11.6 millimeters thick. It has a rosette guilloche at the center, and then there's a wonderful grille above the rosette. We have two aluminum discs, one with the hour, one with the minute, and you can see that Cartier has hidden its secret signature in Roman numeral 7. It does jump precisely on the minute, making it super crisp and an absolute pleasure to play with. It's a wonderful piece of horological theater with which to thrill your friends and indoctrinate them. This will win converts to high horology. Even if you can never explain to them what you love about watches, this defies language. No words are necessary. And you can see, even though it doesn't have a conventional dial, it does still use a watchmaker's 4. On the reverse, manufactured caliber 9905, made in Cartier's La Chaux de Fonds manufacture, twin barrels, each of which has been beautifully solarized, and a 65-hour manual wind power reserve. The bridge beveling is impressive, a combination of mechanical and manual, far better than what you'll find on a standard Cartier watch. We also have black polished screws, and although most regulation will be done with the Edelkrone keys, there is a micrometric eccentric screw regulator using a blued Cartier C, which I absolutely adore. The watch features a descendant of Louis Cartier's original 1909 deployant clasp, which was both Cartier's first deployant clasp and the first deployant clasp ever made for a wristwatch. And because it uses crimping rather than perforation to lock the strap in place, you can see there are no holes to get gouged and reamed on the strap. I'll throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference. You can see it's a full-sized watch. It's not oversized, it's full-sized. Particularly impressive in profile, you can see that the lugs are broken out from the case band, so they're well-defined individually. You can also see that screws and bars are used to fix the watch to its strap. So we're not using spring bars here, we're using the upscale screw and bar system, which ensures greater security than spring bars. And you can see how thin this is at under 12 millimeters. It really does slide underneath the cuff. You know Cartier will be around forever to take care of your watch, and that's often important when you're buying complications that require specialized parts and service. So you've got absolute peace of mind when buying this, whereas from some independent brands that use alternative time displays, you don't always know. Fun fact, the disc for the minute and the disc for the hour, both aluminum to reduce the energy necessary for the jumping. Very cool. A little known and, in my opinion, underrated modern Cartier. I love Moser, but I have to admit some of their concept dials are difficult for me to read. I like hour indices, and this is a great example of hour indices done right. It's also a wonderful example of a Moser watch that thinks outside the box. So this is the Endeavor Center Second Vanta Black. One great stride that Moser started with the tourbillon variant of the Streamliner was that they started cutting into Vanta Black. Vanta Black is the darkest, or I should say the least reflective material in the world. Carbon nanotube structure absorbing 99.965% of light. Now the light that you do see reflecting here is mostly the crystal itself, but it's difficult to print on Vanta Black. And it's also difficult to place indices. So what Moser did was develop a system for cutting holes. So this is a Vanta Black stencil with a silver disc underneath it, and that silver disc is what gives the color to the hour indices. So it's easy to read. We also have a violet fired center seconds hand, and when you see that fired violet seconds hand, you know that you're dealing with one of the double hairspring Moser watches. So on the back of this 40 millimeter stainless steel case, By the way, it is quite thin. We have a caliber HMC 200 with one major change. It's still a bidirectional automatic winder with a magic lever winding system, a hacking second complication, a free sprung balance, and a full balance bridge. What sets this one apart, and you can tell because it's got the signature blued bridge of Moser's double hairspring technology. Two flat hairsprings, 180 degrees opposed, so the effect of gravity will always be equal and opposite from one to the other. When gravity causes one to slow down, the other one will by an equal and opposite margin speed up, ensuring constant amplitude and rate in any position. Essentially, by evening out the asymmetrical element of a flat hairspring, you create an excellent timekeeper that achieves instantaneously on the wrist what a tourbillon would normally require a few minutes to achieve in a pocket. And Moser makes the whole movement, including the hairsprings, the balance, and the escapement. Through Moser's precision engineering subsidiary, it produces all of these sensitive and difficult parts. You can also see that the watch has an aesthetically pleasing 3 Hz beat rate and a recessed bolt balance. Throwing it on the wrist, you can see it's short across the wrist. I'll also focus on one of the highlights of Moser case making. They machine their cases and then hand finish them, which is how they get these lovely sculpted, polished interior hollows in the lug profiles. A very special watch focused on chronometry and actually easy to read, unlike a lot of the Vanta Black and concept dials. This is not a concept dial, and the watch is all the better for it. You can see how flat it is on the wrist. The bezel is concave all the way around to pair the visual mass of the watch. Not that it has a lot of that. All right, the next watch has beastly lume, and I doubt, given 10 tries, you could guess what it is. Although if you look closely, you can see the name highlighted, because there is just so much luminescence on the dial of this Jules Audemars tourbillon chronograph. Originally sold back in 2003, this 43mm handcrafted rose gold tourbillon chronograph is an example of what Audemars Piguet used to do so well, which was craft exquisite, complicated dressed watches. And with the addition of the luminescence, it's even fairly practical. The timepiece with caliber 2879, beautifully decorated and fabricated, has a 70-hour manual wind power reserve, and you can see this elaborate click and click spring up at the top. I love everything about this. You can see all the steel components of the chronograph are crafted with satination across their top and mirrored anglage on their edges. The same is true on the bridges. As you can see, those are mirror anglaged on their edge, but they have Côte de Genève stripes across their top. We have engine-turned perlage, and though it's not easy to see, I'll do my best to highlight that inside the wheels, we have interior beveling of the spokes and the inner circumference, and this is as exquisite as anything you'll find on the likes of Romain Gauthier, Greubel Forsey, Chronometry Ferdinand Berthoud, or Lang und Heine. All of those represent the state-of-the-art and finish. Most Audemars Piguet watches, even complications today, don't rise to that level. But back in the early 2000s and the late 90s, they were still putting in the time, and you could see it evident in all of the parts of this watch. Lateral clutch, column wheel chronograph with outstanding pusher wheel, really among the best that I've experienced. The pusher feel here, sharp and exemplary. Every watchmaker who's ever assembled a column wheel chronograph wants to achieve this. Flipping it all over, you can see we have a 1-minute tourbillon with a black polished steel upper bridge, and you can see it's black polished across the top with bevels on the edges, and we actually have 2 sharp interior angles where bevels meet, one on each side of the seconds hand pinion. Now the tourbillon is a 1-minute tourbillon beating away at 3 Hz. It's beautifully hand decorated. It's also adjusted in 5 positions, free sprung, and equipped with an overcoil hairspring. So you are assured, oh, by the way, watch the turn of the minute right here. You can see a semi-instantaneous jump, but the overcoil ensuring that this watch, along with its 5-position adjustment, will keep excellent time in any position, and a tourbillon should. Now you can see a kinder, gentler era when hallmarks were actually rendered on the flanks of cases. Also, you can see that the lugs were welded on, old school hand case fabrication with welded lugs. It's also fairly short across the wrist, so though it's a 43, it doesn't wear like a 43. It's a lot more compact, and you can see that well on my wrist. It also has a bizarre factory strap that's actually embossed with the pattern of alligator leather, but it is a black rubber strap, which I actually love. I think this is a very wearable, everyday dress complication from Audemars Piguet. It's got a long power reserve, it's got a chronograph, it's got a tourbillon for fun, and it's got lume for practicality. It's also thin thin at only 13.3 millimeters thick with a generously sloped and stepped case flank. This is the pick of the litter from today's program. If you like what you've seen and you want to reach out for more information, reach out to me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com.